good news, bad news situation with the Nebraska series canceled. You could look at this from one perspective, as that's more compelling television. Clearly, Nebraska is closer to Ohio State than Kent State. I think we could agree with that. That was an embarrassment of a game. Don't need to see that again. But the flip side of it is, and Jimmy Himes has pointed this out, he joins us every Wednesday. He's pointed this out several times before. The committee members have not made a declaration, Caleb, that this playoff is going to be about anything other than just wins. Now, they'll change and roll off every 2 years. But right now, why not have an easier schedule, even if your fans don't particularly like it, just to win 10 games and more than likely get in the playoff?
Yeah, and for those who missed it, Nebraska canceled the series in 2026 and 2027 with Tennessee. The reason being the year that they would have visited Tennessee, they have reduction in stadium capacity that year because there's renovation. So they want 8 home games to make up for the revenue loss. That's where that all came from. I think Nebraska did themselves and Tennessee a favor. And Tennessee should thank Nebraska for taking the political hit, if you will, for the taking the publicity hit to cancel this series. Because I'm with you. The committee last year did not care about strength of schedule. They gave no value to it whatsoever. On top of that, we know that 2026, the playoff format's going to change. There's been negotiations about that. We'll probably learn more this week. I think all the presidents and athletic directors and conference commissioners are meeting this week about that. But we know the playoff format's going to change. But in every proposal I've seen, I haven't seen one that's going to increase the value of marquee non-conference games. I haven't seen one in which a marquee non-conference game does anything for you. So, I mean, until the committee or whoever sets this up decides to incentivize that, I wouldn't play them. Sorry, I'm playing 4 Kent States every year until they tell me otherwise. And people can complain about that. People can whine about that. People can say it's cheating the fans. Tennessee's not cheating their fans. The people who run college football are cheating the fans by incentivizing Tennessee to do that. I think Tennessee fans would rather see their team make the playoff than play marquee games, but that's just me.
Okay, here's my take on this situation. You're right, but I think there's something to be said for, let's look at it pragmatically, not what I prefer, not what you prefer. I'd prefer to see a Tennessee-Nebraska game during the season as opposed to having to write about Kent State. But I understand that's a selfish reason for doing it. However, let's look at it pragmatically. Did this Tennessee football team have too big of a head because of what they did in September and what they did against lesser opponents? You pointed out that the average offense is about second in the SEC if you count all games, and it is about 7th in the SEC. So I can't help but wonder pragmatically, Caleb, I'm not going to argue with you about whether or not they get in the committee. We can get to that. But I'm more along the lines of, does that make you a better football team as long as you stay healthy? But that's my big caveat.
Yeah, I mean, and I get you try to strike that balance. It's you see this in college basketball where teams, when they schedule hard non-conference at the beginning of the year, like what Rick Barnes loves to do is even the smaller schools that you're going to beat, he wants the best schools from those conferences that he could possibly get, because he wants to find different ways that his team's going to be challenged. I don't necessarily think, though, Tennessee was feeling themselves too much. I think they were when they went to Arkansas, but they had beaten Oklahoma before that. Remember, they beat Oklahoma and then they went to their bye. So I can't sit there and say they were feeling themselves too much, because it's not like, Oklahoma was no slouch. They weren't great, but they weren't Kent State. I think that they were feeling themselves a bit. I think Lance Hurd wasn't healthy. And Arkansas, that's just a tough place to play if you're not fully prepared to go there. And so I think I don't have a problem with playing easy games, and I know what you're talking about, but they play Georgia in September this year, so there's in 2020. Well, they play Georgia September 2025. I'm sure they'll play a tough game in 2026. So I don't really. I think at this point it's more about, for me personally, it's about showing up the NCAA and the college football playoff committee and the people who run this sport and embarrassing them.
Dylan says, as much as we hate playing the Kent States, I'd rather have a soft get-right game early than to have to play a Michigan in the Big House on week 2. General Ursus, though, sees this completely as different. I'm disappointed that the Nebraska games are canceled. Danny White is being childish about this, considering he backed Tennessee out of the Army and BYU game. USC and Notre Dame are available. Go get them. So we'll get to our poll question, which is what, Caleb?
What do you make of Nebraska canceling the series with Tennessee? Soft or no big deal? Why play big non-SEC games?
Today's tough question brought to you by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney, banksandjones.com.
Why Banks & Jones? Well, it's because they're Tennessee's trial attorney. You can play to win with Banks & Jones because they'll go to trial. You've heard of other lawyers. They say they'll go to trial and fight for you. They won't. They just want to settle. That's the easiest way out. Well, that's not Banks & Jones, led by T. Scott Jones. They won't settle. They'll go to trial for you. Tennessee's trial attorney. They play to win. Truly, Tennessee's trial attorney when it comes to criminal defense or personal injury. Why settle? It's Banks & Jones. T. Scott.
All right, so we're going to get into this a little bit more with Danny White. But first, I want to talk specifically about this game and this series. That's two traditional powers. And Tennessee, because they're in the South, should be better than that other traditional power that wears red. So to me, Nebraska is kind of like the perfect opponent to have. You should beat them. They're not bolstered by juiced up walk-ons anymore. And they're a
I'm glad you come to my side on that, by the way.
I know they're a name win. I mean, they could go 6-6 and you would still say, well, look back at the Nebraska game. Tennessee won that game. That was a big win. Would they not?
Yeah, just like the Oklahoma game this past year. I mean, we tout Tennessee beating Oklahoma, even though Oklahoma was 6-6, I think. Maybe 7-5. But yeah, I mean, I'm with you on that. I think it's a risk, though. It's the type of game. It's also like the Arkansas game. You go to Nebraska, you travel up there, those rowdy fans. I mean, Josh Heupel has experience there. I mean, Josh Heupel had the year Oklahoma won the national title, although I think that was in Norman when they beat Nebraska that year. But still, I mean, he knows the Oklahoma-Nebraska, the old rivalry that used to exist out there. But I think going out there to Nebraska, you don't want to lose that game.
See, I'm of the mindset that if I were a committee member, if you were in the top 25 and you went on the road and lost, that would not affect your vote in my mind at all. If Tennessee played Nebraska, and let's say they're 18. Okay, so Nebraska's 18, Tennessee's 12. I'm just throwing that out there. That should not be a loss as long as you don't get blown out.
Okay, and that's a fair argument. Tennessee's road woes under Josh Heupel, though, makes it possible that they do get blown out. I mean, we've watched enough of them to know that they have just there's some road games that they're just not in sometimes under Josh Heupel because they struggle so badly. So I mean,
go ahead.
Yeah, I all in all, I get the principle of wanting to play them. But this is like why I talked about benching your starters during the conference championship game last year. Part of this for me, Dave, is about showing up the commissioners and the presidents who have set up this system that have really disincentivized you to play or win marquee games. I mean, they just have. And that's a problem with the sport.
So your thoughts, we want to hear from you on the message board. Hit that like button, the thumbs up button. The show represented by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney, banksandjones.com. So what's the perfect opponent for Tennessee in a home and home? This was a home and home, right?
Yeah, this was a home and home. Okay. I don't think they should do home and homes. I think they should straight up be playing 4 Kent States until the format changes. Play 4 Kent States, get your check by playing them at home, and call it a day. They should not bother with neutral site games or any marquee games until the committee decides to fix what they've been doing. And there is absolutely no incentive. And if the new format comes, by the way, and the auto bids are coming, which seems more likely, where the SEC and Big Ten just have auto bids in, and then there's no value in the non-conference games, and you move to 9 SEC games at that point. Now, three non-conference games. Don't play anybody. Just play to tune yourself out. I'm
fine with 9 and 3. 3 being pretty much nobody's, right?
Yeah.
But I'm not cool with 8 and 4. I mean, just that split up. That's 4 games on the schedule. That's a third of the schedule.
That's not my fault.
Oh, I know, but can you imagine the NFL if 6 games were essentially just blowouts and consequential?
You mean like how Tom Brady got to do with the AFC East for his whole career when the AFC East was mostly horrible?
The show represented by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney, banksandjones.com. We broadcast live from the Ted Russell Ford Lincoln Studios.
Like a blast from the past, the Super Dealer is back. Look to the skies, Knoxville. The Super Dealer is fighting for price, service, and the American-made. Ted Russell Ford is your Super Dealer, just in time for Truck Month. Save up to $5,350 on this new Ford F-150 XLT Hybrid, or save up to $7,000 on this new Ford Expedition. Come see the Super Dealer today at either Ted Russell Ford.
What about like a Wake Forest?
They just had Dave Clawson just retired from there. Funny enough. I mean, I wouldn't do a home and home with them. You can come to Knoxville, Wake. I'm not going to Wake.
Okay, what about the Charlotte matchup? Do you hate that?
Yeah, I want him in Neyland. I want that Neyland Stadium money. You come to Neyland Stadium. Until they fix this, I'm playing 4 non-conference home games against Cupcakes every single year.
So this from Dylan. Honestly, I feel like the best opponent is one we're already going to play. Syracuse, a team that will challenge us, but we should still win handily. Yeah, I would say that's comparable. Syracuse and Nebraska, because if Nebraska slipped as much as they have.
I agree. Syracuse is comparable, and they're actually going to be a pretty good team. I don't think Tennessee should have been playing them this year. I think, again, they should cancel that series now and give. I'm dead serious. Go as cupcake as possible until the committee fixes this issue.
Interesting. Our friends at Rick Terry Jewelry Design, they want to be your jeweler looking for affordable game day jewelry, a Tennessee tradition. RickTerryJewelry.com. RickTerryJewelry.com. And if we can pull up Danny White's tweet. Yes.
I actually want to address a comment from General Ursus because he's making a very good point. I don't know if you're a man or woman, General Ursus. Sorry.
You're allowed to ask that anymore.
But you say you see my point. But when you're paying a talent fee on ticket prices, you want the bang for your buck. General Ursus, I get your point on that. But let me ask you a question, and you can respond on the message board. Would you, as someone paying a talent fee, would you rather get more bang for your buck in marquee regular season games, or would you rather see maximize the chances of seeing Tennessee in the college football playoff as a Tennessee fan? I mean,
I just can't believe we're not going to have the Notre Dame matchups. That's just sad, isn't it?
It is, but I hope they fix it. This is a challenge to the committee and a challenge to the leaders of the conferences. They have set up this system, not me.
Okay.
So, and General Ursus is a guy. So,
okay.